Now, as you're going over your notes with education in the ancient world, I want you to make sure that you're not writing everything down that is on every slide, but I want you to listen to the following 5 or 6 minutes of talking, following 5 or 6 minutes of information about education in ancient Rome. And as your handout says, I want you to jot down notes about the main points of education in ancient Rome. You do not need to write down everything on these slides, but you do need to think about the information that is on them and jot down any thoughts that you have concerning. The first thing you need to understand about education in ancient Rome is that education was all about the development of status. It was about taking who you were as a person, the good, noble family that you would have come from if you were being educated, and perpetuating that idea of who your family was and that status you had. So, for example, if your father was a Roman senator, you would want to get an education so that you could live up to that status of your family being senators. Thus, Roman education was all about the development of a person's character, who that person was. It wasn't just about them getting particular pieces of information, right? Passing a standardized test so that they can get a good job one day, but it was about educating them as a person, as a whole. There were three education precepts that Romans followed. There was oratio. You do need to write these three words down. There was the word oratio, which means speech, the idea of someone could express themselves well. So in order to keep your status in Roman society, you needed to be able to express yourself in a clear and direct manner. There was the principle of ius, I-U-S, ius, which means law. Now, this does mean law, like law written down on the books, but it also means the idea of natural law, the idea that everything has an order, and studying that order of things, the order of society, the order of nature, was essential to a well-rounded person. The third and final idea or precept in Roman education had to do with the idea of gravitas. We actually get the word gravity from the word gravitas. You need to write this word down as well as ius and oratio. But gravitas actually means the development of character. It's translated as the word character. And the idea was to develop who that person was, the morals, the ethics, the ability to think. That was the gravitas that a particular person had to develop in order to become an upstanding citizen, especially in Roman elite society. So it was the idea of oratio, ius, and gravitas that drove the Roman education system. What we also need to understand about the Roman education system is that it followed, like many other ancient cultures, especially in the Mediterranean, the Greek idea of education. The Greek idea of education, or the Greek philosophy behind education, was indeed philosophy. The idea that someone should learn how to think and reason rather than just learn particular information. So we had things like the schools in Athens. Aristotle had a particular philosophy, therefore he ran a particular school. So it depended really on which philosophy you wanted to follow. It was according to which school you went to. So Aristotle, his Lyceum, was actually centered around the idea of questioning the world around you and using questions to get to the root of any problem or the core of any answer. Pythagoras actually used the idea of mathematical formulas and the idea of quantifying the world around him in order to understand what that world was like. And so each school followed a particular philosophy, and so it was often with Roman schools. But there were differences. So, for example, Greeks were educated by philosophers and teachers, while Romans were often educated by slaves, often Greek slaves, who were brought over to Rome or Italy from Greece. there were three levels in Greek and Roman education. There was the idea of the literator, the master of letters. It was kind of like the idea of just learning to read and write, some of the basic information that anyone needs to move on to higher education. It's kind of what we would consider first through sixth grade. Grammaticus, if you became a grammaticus, which you did in kind of the middle stage of Roman and Greek education, you were the master of grammar, logic, and reason. It's where you studied not only in schools and in private study, but started to become a an understudy to a mentor, so someone who studies under a particular mentor. And then as you moved into adulthood, you became and schooled in a rhetor, or a master of expression. If you were a rhetor, you studied with private study or a mentorship under other particular philosophers or educators. Now, this is vastly different than our idea of education today. The idea of our education today is that we need to educate everyone because the quality of education is actually the most significant predictor and measure of individual and societal success. We can look at successful countries, successful individuals all around the world and point back to their base in education. Now, I do not mean that every person who was ever successful went to college or had a particular schooling that they went through, but that they were educated individuals. They were people who learned about the world around them and became familiar with the world around them. And many times, those who were most successful in influencing society for good created, in fact, opportunities for others to get the same education or at least obtain the same knowledge and status that they did. But here in America, we have to ask ourselves, what is our education system like and compared to other countries? And what does that mean for the way we look at education as a philosophy of educating everyone? In fact, we say that in the United States, education is for everyone and should be for everyone. Public undertaking of education is the idea that the government undertakes the responsibility of educating and regulating that education through everyone. But we still have to ask ourselves, if education is for everyone, is education actually equal here in the United States? In a study of top performers in science, the OECD makes studies, international studies, every 5 years or so that measures students' scores in particular countries on a standardized international test. As you can see here, the United States is actually number 23. They are also number 25 in education equality, meaning everyone having access to a good education. So I would challenge you to ask yourself, is America equal in the way that it offers education to all? Finland is actually a country, in fact, one of the best in the world that offers equal education for everyone. And has virtually zero achievement gap, meaning that everyone has the opportunity to get the education that he or she wants in the way that they need. There's other education systems like Germany that take a slightly different approach. Germany, in fact, is number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 on this scale. And they take a slightly different approach in that you have primary school or Hauptschule, which is up to the 6th grade, Realschule, which is 7th through 10th grade. You have the opportunity of either doing applied skills with apprenticeships or going to Gesamtschule, which means that you prepare for going to the Gymnasium, where you then prepare for college. You actually go up to grade 13 in Germany because they actually don't have general education classes in college. You're required to go for the 13th year in order to prepare for particular tracks within college. So you actually can do a degree normally in 3 years in a German university because you've already done a year during your high school time doing many of your general education classes. There's also a difference in education approach when you have 1.2 billion people like India does, or 200 million students. They have a very different education system and a much poorer education system because of the vast amount of people and the policies that are implemented and the philosophy around that has recently changed around Indian education. In fact, school was only made mandatory in 2010. You had to go to school up until the third grade. There's a 74% literacy rate, so that means that people can read basic information off a page. They can write their name, they can read signs and things like that on the road. They also have a very different education system than Germany or Finland, which is nearly completely public. India's is 80% public, 20% private, with only 43% people graduating high school. Again, their classroom sizes are 40 to 60 per classroom. This is a classroom with me and my wife while we were working and living in India. And there were about 60 kids in this classroom, which was anywhere from the third to the fifth grade. They were all in one classroom with one teacher in that classroom. And only 7% of people go on to higher education or university or college degrees. So you can see vastly different systems within even the world that we live in today. Even though education is becoming much more modern, you can still see vastly different philosophies behind education and the quality of education that is offered to people. So what I want you to do, as you can see on your handout, is pick one country to research. These countries may not be India, Germany, or America. You must pick another country. I want you to get on your tablets, go to Wikipedia or any internet resources that you like that are appropriate, and prepare a 3-minute presentation of an education system. So just a very short presentation as I've done for each one of these countries. I want you to do that for a country of your choice. So again, you may not pick India, Germany, or America, but you may pick any other ones. You will be graded by your peers on a 3-minute presentation, both telling about the education system from the country that you have chosen and comparing that or contrasting that with Roman education system or philosophy. You'll be graded actually by your peers on this. So you sit in your groups of 4 and you'll actually be graded by your group. You will not be graded by me. This project is due on Friday. There will be no extensions to this project. You must present this project in class on Friday to your group. And you will be graded by the following rubric. So your fellow students at your table will rate you according to each one of these categories. So how good is your comparison that you make to the Roman school system? How much detail do you give of the country's education system which you have chosen? And how well are you communicating with your group? And then there is 1 point for completion for a total of 10 points, which will be taken out of 5 points since this is a culture project.